In the summer of 1986, the town of Windermere was just like any other quiet corner of rural America. A single stoplight, rows of modest homes, and neighbors who knew each other by name. That morning, 15 children from Maplebrook Elementary climbed onto a yellow school bus for what was supposed to be a fun, simple field trip to a local nature reserve. They waved to their parents, excited for a day away from the classroom, laughing and chattering as the bus rolled away under the clear blue sky. But that school bus and the 15 children on board were never seen again. What began as a routine outing spiraled into one of the most baffling child disappearance cases in modern American history. No tire tracks, no calls for help, no sign of struggle. The bus simply vanished. Days turned into weeks, then years. Investigators scoured hundreds of miles, combing forests, draining lakes, and following thousands of leads. Nothing. No bus, no children, no driver. Just silence, and a growing ache in the hearts of the families left behind. Then, 39 years later, on the edge of a construction site 2 towns over, something unearthed. Something that stopped the machines, stunned the workers, and sent a shockwave through the state. A rusted yellow school bus. Buried. This isn't just a tale of tragedy. It's a story buried in time, unearthed with more questions than answers. What happened on that fateful day in 1986? Why was the bus buried? And most chilling of all, why now? Stay with me. Because what lies ahead is a descent into a decades-old mystery, riddled with secrets, sorrow, and the disturbing possibility that someone, somewhere, knows the truth. And they've kept it buried for almost 4 decades. June 17th, 1986, started like any other summer morning in Windermere, a sleepy town tucked into the rolling hills of northern Pennsylvania. It was the kind of place where windows were left open at night, where folks still left their keys in the ignition when they ran into the general store. Nothing bad ever really happened in Windermere, at least not until that day. Maplebrook Elementary was a small red brick building that served grades K through 5. The students who arrived that morning were buzzing with excitement. The end of the school year was only days away, and the field trip to Briar Glen Nature Reserve was the perfect prelude to summer freedom. The 15 kids chosen to go were part of a special enrichment program, bright, curious, adventurous. Parents lingered in the parking lot longer than usual, chatting, laughing, snapping Polaroids. A few mothers wiped away tears as their little ones waved from the steps of the bus. "They grow up too fast," one father said. The bus driver, a 42-year-old named Randall Hales, had driven that route for over a decade. Dependable, quiet, never once called in sick. At 8:03 a.m., bus number 94 pulled out of the school lot and made a left onto Pine Hollow Road, headed west. That was the last confirmed sighting. The weather was warm, the skies clear. The route to Briar Glen took them along a familiar stretch of wooded highway, only 32 miles away. The entire trip should have taken 45 minutes. But by 9 o'clock, the rangers at the reserve hadn't seen or heard from the group. By 9:30, the school secretary began making calls. By 10:15, a teacher was driving the route herself, scanning the ditches. By 11 o'clock, it was clear. Something was very wrong. Windermere would never be the same again. The first few hours were filled with a strange blend of hope and denial. "They probably stopped for gas," one parent said. "Maybe the driver took a wrong turn," offered another. But as noon came and went with no sign of bus number 94, the mood in Windermere shifted from worry to panic. By 1 p.m., the school had contacted the local sheriff's department. Deputies were dispatched to canvass the entire route to Briar Glen. The principal, Harold Lenley, called every parent personally, his voice shaking as he repeated the same words over and over. "We haven't heard from the bus. We're doing everything we can." Soon, what had started as a quiet weekday morning turned into a full-blown emergency. Parents began arriving at the school in tears. Some tried driving the route themselves, windows down, yelling their children's names into the thick woods that lined the two-lane road. Volunteers gathered, spreading out in all directions, walking through fields and forested trails. Helicopters arrived before sunset, scanning from above. But still, nothing. No skid marks, no broken branches, no signs of a crash. Not even a single discarded backpack. It was as if the bus had simply evaporated. The driver, Randall Hales, had no criminal history, no debt, no known enemies. He didn't even have a speeding ticket on record. Investigators checked his home, his route logs, his family. Nothing stood out. His wife, in tears, insisted that Randall loved kids and had never once been late in his life. As the sun dipped behind the trees and darkness crept across the town, a quiet horror settled over Windermere. Search parties carried flashlights and megaphones deep into the woods, calling names into the night air, hoping, praying for any kind of answer. By the second day, the FBI was involved. The missing bus, the missing children, the complete lack of physical evidence, it all pointed to something no one in Windermere wanted to say out loud. This wasn't an accident. This was a disappearance, an abduction, a vanishing that defied logic, stretched reality, and planted seeds of terror in a town that had once felt untouched by tragedy. 15 children left for a field trip, and not a single one came back. By the third day, Windermere was no longer just a town. It had become a crime scene. The FBI took over operations from local authorities, setting up a mobile command unit near the school. Agents in dark suits fanned out, interviewing teachers, parents, and students, trying to reconstruct every detail of that morning. The bus's route was traced inch by inch. Drones scanned the nearby woods. Divers combed nearby ponds and rivers. Cadaver dogs were brought in from 3 different states. Over 400 volunteers helped search over 60 square miles. Farmers let agents dig through fields. Locals left porch lights on for nights at a time, hoping it would somehow help. Aerial footage was studied. Maps marked with red pins bloomed with possibilities. But with every new effort came the same conclusion. No bus, no tire tracks, no wreckage, no remains. National media descended on Windermere like hawks. Satellite trucks lined the narrow streets. Reporters camped outside the school. Microphones shoved into the faces of grieving parents. Maplebrook Elementary shut down for the rest of the school year. Some families moved away. Others stayed, clinging to the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this was all some terrible mistake. One theory gained traction early on, that the bus had been hijacked. But if that were the case, where were the witnesses? No one had seen a chase, heard a scream, or spotted anything unusual that morning. There was no evidence of forced entry, no ransom note, no calls. Just absence, a chilling, echoing silence. Investigators looked into the backgrounds of the missing children, any shared connection, any family ties to crime or debt. But they found nothing. These were regular kids, a science lover, a future ballet dancer, a quiet boy who loved drawing robots. No patterns, no motive. The official word was unresolved disappearance. Unofficially, everyone had the same thought. Something dark had taken place in Windermere, and someone out there had made 15 children and a 30-foot school bus vanish without a trace. Weeks turned into months. The daily search updates stopped. The headlines faded. One by one, the news vans packed up and rolled out of Windermere. The investigators, though persistent, had little left to investigate. Every inch of the route had been scoured. Every tip had led to a dead end. Every wild theory had been examined, debunked, or abandoned. The FBI's presence dwindled, reduced to the occasional follow-up visit. Cold case units filed their reports, boxed up the evidence, what little there was, and stored it away in archives. The town's residents were left to wrestle with a truth no one could explain. 15 children were gone, and no one could say why. Some families moved away, unable to bear the haunted silence of the empty bedrooms. Others stayed, clinging to memorials, birthdays never forgotten, chairs kept at the dinner table. Every year, on June 17th, the school hosted a candlelight vigil. Photos of the missing were lined up on the gymnasium stage. Names were read. Bells tolled 15 times. Rumors continued to swirl, sightings, psychic visions, strange dreams. But no new evidence ever surfaced. The town adjusted in the way only tragedy can force, by living with a wound that never healed. Decades passed. The children of Windermere grew up, moved on, built lives in the shadow of a mystery their parents never forgot. To outsiders, it became just another unsolved case, one of those creepy stories whispered around campfires. But to Windermere, it was a gaping hole, and it would stay that way until 2025. Though the case officially went cold, the mystery of the Windermere 15 never truly faded. Over the years, strange clues trickled in, just enough to keep hope flickering and fear alive. In 1993, an anonymous letter was mailed to the Windermere Police Department. It was handwritten in shaky block letters and postmarked from Ohio. It read only, "The bus is underground. They're not dead. Don't dig. No return address, no fingerprints, nothing." In 2001, a hunter reported seeing a rusted school bus in the woods near the state border. Authorities followed up, but all they found was an abandoned van, stripped and burned. Another dead end. Then, in 2007, a woman named Elise Crampton came forward on a late-night radio show, claiming she had been one of the children scheduled to be on the bus, but had stayed home that day due to a stomach flu. Her voice trembled as she described dreams that haunted her every year on June 17th. Cold metal, screaming in the dark, dirt falling from above. She insisted they weren't dreams, they were memories she never made. Listeners were captivated, investigators were not. In 2013, the town's only psychic, an eccentric man named Walter Phelps, led a live-streamed seance on the anniversary of the disappearance. He claimed to have contacted the souls beneath the wheels. He went into a trance, spoke in a voice not his own, and gave coordinates that led to the middle of a long-abandoned orchard. Nothing was found, yet for every false lead there was always a whisper, a shadow in the periphery, a belief that someone out there knew something and wasn't speaking. By 2024, the case had become a chilling footnote in true crime lore. And then, in the summer of 2025, the dirt finally gave something back. It was a blistering July afternoon in 2025 when the past clawed its way back to the surface. Just outside of Gracefield, 2 towns over from Windermere, a construction crew was clearing land for a new luxury housing development. The lot had once been farmland, left untended for decades, choked with weeds and rusting machinery. The backhoe operator, Kyle Densmore, was digging a trench for a drainage pipe when he felt something hard strike the bucket. At first, he thought it was an old septic tank, but when the metal gave way with a crunching screech, he saw faded yellow paint beneath layers of soil and rust. He shut down the machine, called his supervisor. The supervisor called the sheriff. Within 2 hours, the site was crawling with law enforcement. The workers stood in silence as police cordoned off the area. The front grille of a vehicle, square, dented, unmistakably vintage, peeked out from the dirt. A serial number was found near the rear axle, cross-referenced within hours. Bus number 94. Word spread like wildfire. The media swarmed Gracefield. Residents of Windermere drove in, eyes wide, mouths trembling. Grown adults who had been classmates of the missing children stood in the grass, staring at the excavation like they were looking into a grave. But it wasn't just the bus that was buried, it was something darker, something unspoken. As forensic teams began carefully removing soil from around the vehicle, whispers traveled through the crowd. Was it all finally over? Would they find bodies? Would there be closure? The bus was almost fully intact, but deeply rusted and sunken at an angle. Windows were shattered inward, some bent from pressure. The front door had been jammed shut, and when they finally peeled it open, the air that escaped was thick and foul. Still, after all those years. Inside, there were no bodies. But there were clues, enough to reopen the investigation, enough to keep you awake at night. The interior of the bus was like a time capsule, one that had decayed into something unsettling. Seats were rotted through, metal frames warped and rusted. But some of the children's belongings remained. A cracked Walkman, its cassette still inside. A pair of pink sneakers, their laces tied neatly together. A Polaroid photo, water-damaged but still visible. A group of kids laughing, arms around each other, standing by the school sign. All 15 were in the shot. It was dated June 17th, 1986, the very morning of the trip. On the back of the bus, beneath one seat, investigators found a set of notebooks. Composition books, the kind used for school assignments. But the writing inside wasn't from a teacher's lesson. It was frantic, erratic, scribbled in different hands. One note read, "We can't get out. The door won't open. It's so dark now. Randall isn't answering anymore." Another said, "Someone was outside." We heard footsteps above us, but when we screamed, they didn't help. And one scrawled in bold, slashing ink. "They told us to be quiet, that it would only be a few hours. It's been days." Fingerprints were lifted from the notebooks. Some matched those of the missing children, based on prints taken from old school files. Others did not match anyone in the existing databases. There were other strange details. The emergency exit had been welded shut from the outside. Small ventilation holes had been punched into the roof, again crudely and from above. The floor of the bus had been layered with loose soil and tree bark, as if someone had tried to create insulation or silence. But the most disturbing discovery was this. At the back of the bus, someone had carved into the metal wall with a sharp object. It read, "We are still here." No human remains were ever found, no driver, no bones, no blood. But what they found was enough to shake the town and the country to its core. Because this wasn't just a buried bus, it was a message. The discovery of bus number 94 reignited national attention and reopened wounds Windermere had spent decades trying to heal. The FBI swiftly reclassified the case from a cold file to an active investigation. Forensic teams reanalyzed every scrap of evidence. DNA testing was expanded using modern methods. Satellite imagery from 1986 was requested from archived government databases. A dedicated tip line was set up, and within 48 hours it received over 2,000 calls. Theories flooded the airwaves. Some believed the children had been kidnapped by a cult. The idea wasn't new. Rumors of strange gatherings in the nearby forests had circulated for years. Symbols drawn in the notebooks bore eerie resemblance to markings associated with fringe religious sects active in the 1980s. Others pointed to a government cover-up. Former military personnel speculated about secret bunkers in the region, Cold War-era facilities, or experimental testing gone wrong. Had the bus stumbled onto something it wasn't meant to see? One theory suggested the children had survived for a time, that the bus had been buried with them inside, intentionally. The crude air holes, the pleas for help, the diary entries. It all pointed to a slow, deliberate confinement. Local suspicion returned to the bus driver, Randall Hales. But if he was responsible, Where was his body? And how could he have buried a 10-ton vehicle without help? Most haunting of all was the question nobody wanted to voice. If no bodies were found, could some of them still be alive? And if they were, where were they now?